to Spotlight on the Great Blacks in Wax. My name is Jules Dunham Howie.
And I'm Damian Campbell.
And we're here today with Miss Lenora Dawson. And we're excited about being here today for this particular show because we're on the constellation. And I don't know if you all know, but the constellation played a very significant role after slavery was abolished. Shortly after the Emancipation Proclamation came forth, that said that that ended slavery. There goes the cannon! We are indeed on the ship! We're on the ship! So, but that's important because that cannon, you can only imagine, that cannon actually went off, and that was a warning shot for boats that were in the water who were illegally transporting slaves after the abolishment of slavery. And so this ship played that significant role in history. And we're here today, right here, talking about that significance with Lenora Dawson. So now, Lenora, tell us a little bit about you, and we know that you're seeking political office. Yes. So just tell us a little bit about that as we talk about this topic today.
I am Lenora Dawson. Again, I am running for the office of Clerk of the Circuit Court, Baltimore City. I'm excited, really excited to be here on the Constellation because, as I said before, it brings back a lot of memories. I was just educated because I did not have any idea the role that the Constellation played in terms of emancipating people who were being brought into bondage illegally. So that gives me a different perspective on the ship all in itself.
Exactly. And so my understanding is that the ship would encounter the boats, and when they came upon them and they realized that they were slave ships, they would actually arrest the crew, and then they would release the slaves.
Wow.
And so that actually helps me get a better understanding of why Maryland is known to have so many free blacks as well. Because you can think, those ships held thousands of slaves at a time coming over, and all of them would have been released. And now granted, they wouldn't have known what was going on, but they quickly found out that it was a better life, and were able to just come and become free.
One of the things you have to see when you go to the Blacks in Wax Museum is their exhibit on the slave ship that they had there. It's very, very compelling, very deep. It's been there for years.
Amongst many other exhibits, the one thing I love about the Great Blacks in Wax Museum is that it is just a treasure trove of African American history. And so if you are looking to learn about African American history, it's really where you want to go, because when you look at the school system now, Lenora, they are taught, our young people are taught about maybe 3 to 5 historic African Americans, and that's it. They don't think anybody else did anything. And so it's so important that we expand their horizon and that they can understand our significance in history and some of the things that we've done. What do you think about that?
I think that's correct. I think that history is very important. I think the Great Blacks in Wax Museum does a great job in terms of teaching people that history. And I think that it's very important that we engage in self-scholarship, because we're not going to be taught everything we need to learn in school that's going to help us on a holistic, from a holistic perspective, meaning making us whole and making us aware, because there's a lot of power with knowing and understanding your history. Because then we get to understand behaviors, how people who have suffered from cumulative trauma react to certain situations, how the perception that exists within this country. So there's so many things that we learn from learning our history, and I think the Great Blacks in Wax Museum does a great job in terms of displaying it. And one thing that actually stunned me the first time I walked in was how true to life everything is and how realistic it is. And it's almost like when you're having the tour that you can feel the energy of the time. So I think that it's important that families and parents take their children and go themselves.
Yes.
Because a lot of times I have conversations with adults and they don't know anything about their history. And schools just don't teach history at the depth and level in which they should. As a matter of fact, Jules, I just took a tour and I'd like to share it with you. Let's take a look.
30 minutes.
No, you can't. No. Sorry.
So imagine a 6-year-old child being expected to pick 125 pounds of cotton. But that was how they began to buy the slaves. And when they were sold, if they were in that category where they were going to work and make money, then you didn't want them to die. Many of them would decide that they would starve themselves. And so if there was a chance that money was to be made, then they would not be allowed to starve themselves. They would be force fed. If they weren't going to make a lot of money, going up at auction, if they and we'll talk about some of that in the slave ship, then there was no need to force feed them because you had no food to waste on them. But if they were going to make money for you, then you wanted to keep them alive.
So, the feeding them was what?
Yes. He would be, it would be a gruel-like paste, flour, millet, and things like that, and water, or sometimes oil or sorghum and so forth. Pasted, mixed together, and then they would be fed. The slaves had to be made mentally ready to get on those ships and find out who was in charge. And so a part of the process was called breaking or seasoning. And one form of the breaking and seasoning involved the whip. Sailors talk about cutting wounds so deep into some African backs that they could actually put their hands down in the sore. And when the African back healed, it often looked like that. It had those kinds of scars. If you were a pregnant woman and they felt that you needed to be physically broken with the whip because you were resisting, then they dug a hole, laid her on the ground, put her stomach inside the hole to cushion and protect their property growing inside of her, and then pregnant women could be beaten in the same way. But if you weren't broken at this level, then you needed to be made an example of. You're still resisting, so you might find yourself locked into a device like this. It had this iron part around the waist, and there were spike-like steel things coming out of it, so if you moved your body, it would cut into your flesh. This iron collar around the neck, it had the same kind of spikes. This bar coming down all the way to the back of your knees to force you to have to stand up straight and take this weight. And then these bells. I ask kids what these bells are for, and I get answers like if you were moving or you're trying to get away, and those are all true. But of this person, but through fear you got control of everybody else. Now you have a system. And so, again, the purpose of these bells is bringing out fear, actually. You're still fighting, however, and so you needed the ultimate punishment, and that was the iron mask. And many of you've read perhaps the Man in the Iron Mask and so forth. These kinds of devices were used mainly by the Europeans as a form of religion. And being a history resource, we've got children to save. So we're going to go into the slave ship. This side of the museum represents what we call, what is this thing called slavery? And this thing called slavery meant a number of things. So you had people like for the Underground Railroad fighting to help slaves escape. This is the abolitionist Thomas Garrett. He worked very closely with Harriet Tubman. And he is putting the slaves through what looks like a stove, but if you come down a little bit farther, then you can see. Other way around.
For what reason?
This is a tongue.
I got that. I have a reason to stand that.
We're going to go now into a very graphic exhibit. It is lynching. Do you understand the term lynching? No. What is it?
To hang.
Right. It's mob rule in which a person is hanged by the mob. It is hanging someone outside the law. It's not execution by law. And many thousands of black people were lynched in America. So it's
I believe in humanity, I believe in human rights, and whatever we've seen today, it is beyond imagination, beyond humanity, beyond anybody who respects life to do such thing against any human. We are with protecting animals, and the way I've seen it now is less than even treating animals. I hope this finishes in life. I hope we live in peace and we never see such thing again happening, because this is against any religion in the world. No matter what, God will never accept.
Wow. It's very powerful.
Indeed, and I think that's one of the things that I appreciate about the Great Blacks in Wax Museum is the fact that they tell the truth. They do not sugarcoat our history. And they want people to really understand, and you can't help but to have a visceral reaction when you see the atrocities that we had to endure as a people. And the issue of lynching is so relevant today because in the climate that we live in, it used to be latent and it has been unearthed. And now it is out here. And people think it is absolutely fine to have that type of sentiment. I dislike you because of the color of your skin enough to want to see you hung from a tree. And it's okay. And I can put it on a t-shirt and say I'm proud that that's how I feel. And that really is what we're having to grapple with, I believe, here today in society. And our young people are stuck trying to grapple with this issue. But lynching is very real. And I believe that it's still alive in many people's hearts today.
Jules, the exhibit was very impactful. And one thing I appreciate about Brian Stevenson is that he understands that in order for us to heal and move forward, we have to confront our history and we have to look at it. So as a result, they have erected a museum for all of the people who was lynched down south. And it's a very impactful museum, so look it up on the internet. I'm not sure exactly where the location is, but I do plan to take my son this summer after the election is over. That's going to be one of our trips because we have to deal with this issue and own it so that we can heal and move forward.
Absolutely. We're going to take a break and we'll be right back.
We're back at the Great Blacks in Wax Museum. I'm Damian Campbell, here with my co-host, Jules Dunham. Howie. And we are here with Miss Lenora Dawson. It's been a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
And you know, one of the things I absolutely love when you go to the Great Blacks in Wax Museum is their exhibit on Egypt. I had the fortune of going to Egypt a couple of times, and one of my best friends is Egyptian. And I was impressed with the level of detail and how correct they are in their depiction of what it really looks like in Egypt and what that culture is all about. And for me, it was eye-opening because Egypt is North Africa, but when you go to Egypt, they consider themselves Egyptian. They would never say they're African. We are Egyptian because they consider themselves to be the first people. And so
and history will tell you that that's not true.
I didn't know. Look, we had many debates for a long, long time about that. But because of that, you know, it's very interesting because.
And you know, ladies, they also have other programs such as inductions every year. And let's have a look at some of the induction programs.
Thank you very much. 18 years
18 years the Baltimore County Social Festival has existed, and they did not want this occasion to end without their presentation. So at Broadway, which is the Great Black Museum, you can bring your friends with you. Everyone, there's a location and a person that you have met. You have met the person. You know why you want to do or look like Bolivia there in the Great Black Museum. On behalf of Radio 1, on behalf of Radio 1, the Great Black Museum, and for our community with love to Dr. Kathy Hughes. Let's promise it with great love. Kathy Hughes, thank you for coming down this way. I want to go to Kathy Hughes right here. Okay, thank you so very much. She's going to be coming to the different booths and the next minute, which is Ken Reader and the Radio 1 VIP will be access.
Not be about Barack Obama. It cannot be. It can be about Barack Obama, but it cannot be about Barack Obama. And I know that there are some of you who clearly understand what it is I'm saying. Because to make it only about Barack Obama is to dishonor, say, Queen Anne Nzinga, and I happen to think that Michelle Obama might want it to be about Queen Anne Nzinga.
See a little further than I could see. Come on. As a matter of fact, going back to Great Blacks in Wax, we have to marvel over the fact that there were so many who may have looked at a fence because they were down here and others was continuing to stand on their shoulders, but they could see through the fence. It's our world. If we are going to make it better for our children, we must not only know their pain, we must know how to address it with regard to the people who can make a difference, and we must be the agents of that change.
I think it's exciting, first of all, to have Kathy Hughes, who's local. She's a businesswoman. She's very powerful, the first African-American woman to own her own radio station network, Radio 1. So I think that that's a very powerful figure, especially for young black girls to see, so that they can see their capacity in terms of what they can do. And then, of course, having the first African-American president, that is powerful all in itself. So, yeah.
And you know what I love about it? Is history is alive, and history is living. And so this, when you go to the Great Blacks in Wax Museum, you're looking at history not just from the past, but the present. And that's what I appreciate, is they celebrate and bring you all the way up to current day. So you can see Kathy Hughes, and you can meet Kathy Hughes right here and now. She's alive and well. And you can see Obama, and you can meet one day Obama and his wife. Because they're alive. And so I think that's an important connect, because a lot of people see history or hear history and they think you're only going to get the past.
Right. And they're disconnected because they can't, you know, sometimes when it's not real and present for some people, then they don't really connect. It doesn't really resonate with them. So I think to memorialize people in wax is just such a tremendous idea. And I recommend everyone to go to the Great Blacks in Wax Museum.
The National Blacks in Wax Museum.
Don't forget it, because that's a big feat. They just were able to get that. So it is time for a break. We'll be right back momentarily.
right, we are back. We're actually wrapping up now. We hope you enjoyed our show at the National Great Blacks in Wax Museum. And
yes, and it's been a phenomenal day, and we want to encourage you to go to the National Great Blacks in Wax Museum, and make sure you check out the room where you can see all of the athletes. Anybody you want to see, you can see them. They've got them there for you in wax. So, and we're grateful for Lenora Dawson being with us. Did you enjoy your time, Lenora?
I had a great time. This is really exciting. So I am so grateful that you guys had me on, and I appreciate it.
Well, we wish you well, and we look forward to being with you again after the election.
Yes.
And hopefully we will be seeing you as the new clerk.
Yes, and make sure you vote June 26th.
So Lenora, tell us how people can reach you and connect.
Sure, they can reach me at Dawson, DAWSON 4FORE clerk.com or at lenora.dawson1228@gmail.com.
Excellent. Well, again, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us. We look forward to seeing you again soon.